Welcome to Transcendent Leadership. We bring together top leaders and experts to share their unfiltered truth about the journey to self-actualization and the path to heart-centered leadership. You'll hear raw lessons, learn ancient wisdom, and practical steps to rise to your fullest potential. Now is the time to walk into this new paradigm of leadership. Let's transcend together. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Transcendent Leadership. I'm your host, Carissa Johnson, and we are back. And I say we because you are all on this journey with me. I am back at home in Boulder recording in my home space while we still are making space for and receiving a lot of opportunities around studios and ways in which we can take this show to another level. I'm still embracing the humility and the comfortability and the joy that comes from recording spontaneously in my own home and loving it, and also ready for what's next, which will be happening when it happens, the divine time, of course. But I always feel like I want to continue to keep you all on the journey with me because there's a lot of things that are changing and transforming in my life and my business. And I find this balance sometimes challenging because I want to share more with you. And then I also feel it's important to kind of keep some things to myself because of the sacredness of all of it and wanting a little bit more of that privacy too, right? So I'm finding that balance. I am human as well. And I hope that you all see how much I really just want to show my humanness on this show. And that's what I invite a lot of the leaders and the people who are going to continue to come on the show, which we'll be having soon. I hope. It's just been there's been some blips in the recording, but ultimately that's what transcendent leadership for me is really about. It is about the humility that it takes to walk this path, the reverence of divine timing, the trust and the surrender, and the courage and the raw, vulnerable moments that we have where we are just going through it. And while I feel like I'm on the other side of that for the most part, we go into seasons, right? We go into seasons, and there's still some remnants that I'm ridding myself of in this one, which is part of the topic that I wanted to share with you today. And it is about forgiveness. And this podcast and the next one are going to be about two really simple concepts that have radically changed the trajectory of my life. I grew up as a young girl who often subconsciously held a lot of resentment. I had a difficult childhood, which I've shared a lot about, but what I didn't share was that it was really interesting for me as an adult to go beyond the mental, like, oh, this happened to me. And certainly there's the somatic aspects to that. But even there was like lingering energy of the way that I viewed my parents and my sibling and life. There was this subtle, lingering, resentful energy. And many of you have been messaging me about the last couple episodes about family and about healing. It's so interesting that Spirit continues to ask me to share messages. And I always wonder, are people resonating with this right now? And it's always a beautiful surprise to me that I get dozens, and one day there will hopefully be hundreds of messages where we're all talking about certain things that we're navigating, certain themes that are rising with astrology, with our birth charts, with all of the ways in which the divine has us look at things in our life. And forgiveness has been one that's been really, really, really strong in my energy field because I grew up in a very difficult home environment, navigating a lot of substance use and challenges. Even though I healed a lot, I still held on to the story that these are the things that happened to me, and this is why I am the way that I am. And it wasn't even fully in awareness. And a couple of weeks ago, I was praying and I was in this prayer state. It's like a meditative state where I'm not only just focusing on connecting with spirit above, but like the God spirit, the goddess inside of me, and asking, where in my life am I still experiencing a charge? Where in my life am I holding on to resentment? Who do I need to forgive? And something I don't talk a lot about, but I keep feeling the nudge to, and sometimes just don't know how, is talking about my relationship with Jesus, whose real name was actually Yeshua. So I might use his name interchangeably. And I've talked about him on other episodes, but I don't share how important my relationship with Yeshua has been in the last few years, deepening and learning about him, reading the Bible, reading the book of Revelations, and having direct experience with him coming into my life at my altar, guiding me, showing me. And it felt like when I was asking this question, Yeshua, Jesus, really asked me to make amends with all of these people, including myself, that I was still holding on to something with, whether it was blame or anger or shame. Shame was a really big one that I was holding on to for myself. And so I'm going to share a little bit vulnerably about this topic, not just in the overarching, like, what does forgiveness mean, but also how I've been navigating it as a leader, as a woman, as somebody who's still walking this path every single day, and what it's asked of me. And it's tender, and it's scary to talk about it, because some of the things I still am unraveling with forgiveness. I still am waking up every single day forgiving myself for the way in which I showed up for a friend and I wasn't perfect, or waking up and forgiving myself for the the harshness with which sometimes I treat myself, wanting to be better, but also doing it in a way that feels very punishing, feels very judgmental. And so when I asked Jesus about this, or Jesus came through, actually, I was told to write a list and get really clear on the people. It was particularly people, but they were encompassed in situations. And there were there were like five. There were five people in my life that I had a charge with, one being myself. And so every day, not every day, I'm sorry, every week for the last month or so, I have been in communication with these individuals whom I've still held on anger around, blame, projection. And I'm going to share two in particular, one which is another person and the other one which is myself. So when I became aware of this person, and actually let me backtrack for a moment. What what is forgiveness? Let's even talk about that, because before I even go into getting into forgiveness, I feel like it's important to discuss what forgiveness is. And I don't actually understand from a mental perspective what forgiveness is. It could mean accepting, making amends with, I was going to say forgiving, letting go of, coming to peace with, like that those mental those words, that language that comes through around forgiveness makes sense to me. But it's also true that you can forgive someone, but still somatically, cellularly in your body, hold a charge with them. And I think that that was the big distinction for me, was that I was and had forgiven many people. I let that go mentally. That's not taking up space or real estate in my mind. And I've accepted and I'm at peace with what happened. However, in my body, I did not release the hold that the experience or the person still had over me. I was still holding on to the intensity and the density of the blame and the anger and the frustration of that experience. Like, why did I need to go through that? What happened there? What did I miss? What did I miss in this experience that it's still lingering in my energy field? And one of the people in particular, now that I've kind of laid the framework, right? It's like not only just something that happens in the mind, but happens in the body, where you really can breathe through and feel ease when you think about that person, where you can think about that experience and there's not like a clenching or there's not a contraction, where you could actually be in maybe an engagement or interaction with that person, and there's not a hiding or a circling back to that past, that your energy field, your body feels spacious, you feel relaxed, you feel at ease, almost as if it had never happened before. That's what I really think forgiveness for me means, is I'm living in such a state where I have come to terms with, come to peace with, so much so that it's not even in my energy field. It's almost as if it never happened. And it really reminds me of the statement, like, you can forgive but never forget. Why would we not want to forget it? Why would we not want that imprint to be dissolved? Why would we not want it to be rid ourselves of it? I want to forget these things. That doesn't mean that I didn't extract the lesson, which I think is the ultimate higher purpose and truth, is to extract it, but not to hold on to it, to absolutely forget it, to let it go, to not have it in the memory that you need to be looping around. And so, one of the people that I still had this charge with was an ex. And this particular relationship was so different for me because it was one of the shortest relationships I've ever had, but also one of the most intense relationships I've ever had. Some people might identify this kind of relationship where it happens fast and it's intense and all your stuff comes up and you learn so many amazing lessons, but then you have a hard time pulling apart and disconnecting and disengaging. It's like this back and forth, in and out. Like, I've literally felt crazy. And I've dissected this and I've processed this, and I feel like I'm in a space to talk about it because it was a whirlwind. And many people would talk about these kinds of relationships and call them karmic relationships. This felt very karmic, like we had a past life. We came here to learn from each other again, and we very much were not meant to be together, but that we were here to show each other who we really are. And it felt very intense for me. And I felt very chained still to that experience because from that from that relationship, it sparked and awoken something within me that was so deep, something and multiple things that I had suppressed within myself. So there was a lot of anger of like, you woke this up in me. And then now we're not together. So I have to pick up the pieces. I have to hold myself through this. And while I'm not in a victim state, there were moments where I definitely was like, fuck you. Why did this need to happen to me in this way? My life was going so perfectly. And that was all an illusion. It certainly wasn't. But our relationship and our dynamic really woke up a lot within me. And so I started remembering and started asking Spirit, God, Yeshua, to show me where I was still angry at this person and why I had not forgiven them. And I could already feel like a little tenderness around this experience because I believe that I had not forgiven him because I was still wanting him to do something. I was wanting him to apologize. I was wanting him to take responsibility. I was wanting something from him in order for me to feel okay. And I think that that's where we get mixed up with forgiveness. We think that the other person needs to do something in order for us to forgive them. They need to say sorry. They need to take responsibility. They need to make amends. They need to offer clarity. They need to give context. You do this and I will let it go. which feels very controlling, because underneath the essence of forgiveness is truly unconditional love. I see the love in you, sees the love in me, sees the love in you. The light in me sees the light in you. That is forgiveness, where we see life and other people as a mirror that we're willing to take a look at and say, oh, there is something that I am needing to take responsibility for. And as this was arising within me, I realized that I was needing and wanting him to take responsibility. And yet he had reached out over the last couple of years to do that. And I declined him and I told him no, because I wanted to have control. I wanted to have the upper hand. I wanted to say and to walk away from that relationship like I walked away. I'm the bigger person, even though that was my ego saying, oh, I'm the bigger person. And when he came around to apologize, there was the part of me, because it's not actually my truest essence, me, but the part of me that still wanted to have the upper hand. I wanted to be like, no, you wronged me and you don't deserve to hear. I don't deserve, or you don't deserve to have my time. That was really present for me. And when Yeshua brought this into my awareness, and it's even anchoring more deeply now, I was realizing that that was not love, that kind of energy was infiltrating my system. And I remember this story about, I think it was about Jesus. And I don't remember if it's factual or if it was just like in something I watched about him, where him and his apostles are traveling, they're sharing the word, and somebody asks him something about anger. And they say, I'm angry and I want to be angry. And he said something along the lines of, yeah, but how does that feel in your body? You're the one that's holding on to anger. You're the one that still has that in your field. You're living every day angry. How does that feel for you to have that anger? And it reminded me of, I'm holding on to the anger. I'm the person who's essentially creating my own suffering around this because I want them to act in a certain way, which was also part of what showed up in our relationship for both he and I. There was this essence of, you need to behave in a certain way in order for me to love you more. And that was difficult because I experienced that on my end from him. And I also have a part that wanted him to do and behave and be a certain kind of person or say certain things or love me in a way that I felt like I needed to be loved in order for me to want to give love. So I was, and up until a couple of weeks ago, I was withholding. I was withholding the love, the unconditional love, the truth of divinity from this person, trying to control the way that we were engaging with each other and continuing to press him down, shove him down, saying, this is not enough. You are not enough. And then using it as almost this spiritual egotism of, I'm being the bigger person because I'm creating a boundary, which in some ways I needed to do, but in other ways was actually this like spiritual elitism that I don't need to hear you. You don't deserve to be heard. And while I didn't need to have a conversation with him, I realized I was still holding on to this. So all of this to say that I needed to forgive him. I needed to forgive him, not just because he deserves that, not just because it was lingering in my field and I deserve to be released of this density and this emotion, but because by me forgiving him, I'm forgiving myself. As I forgive another, I also forgive that which I have also contributed to in those experiences, or ways in which in other areas of my life I have done the same. So if I can forgive him for my experience of him as being controlling, I can forgive that in myself. If I can forgive him for the ways in which I felt manipulated, I can forgive the parts of me that manipulate. If I can forgive him for whatever it is, I can forgive that same thing within myself, we cannot there's a saying that we cannot give to another what we are unwilling to give to ourselves. But I also think that sometimes when we give something to another, we're able to give that to ourselves. I shared this about this relationship with my dad over the last couple of years. As I was softer, more gentle and compassionate to my father, I was able to not only receive more love and gentleness and compassion from him, but I softened in myself. So I think the opposite is also true, that we have a difficult time giving to ourselves what we are unwilling to also give to another. It works symbiotically, it works synergistically. It's the chicken or the egg, which one kind of comes first. So I was holding on to resentment towards myself. And in order to forgive myself, I also had to forgive him, the order of which became him first, because I had to see the ways in which he was the embodiment or the reflection of the things that I was unwilling to look at in myself. And I noticed this with other relationships as well. I have a friend of mine who actually I live with currently who's a reflector, and she reflects back to me deep medicine for judgment, for the ways that I ridicule, for the ways that I withhold, for the ways that I stay small. She reflects that back to me, but we all do that for each other. So over the last couple of weeks, I've been really diving into, how do I actually forgive him? What does that really look like? And this has been a process that would probably be like a full masterclass, and maybe I will do one day. But for the sake of this conversation in this podcast, I'll break it down really simply. I had to ask myself a couple of questions. Am I willing to let this go? Because what does that mean if I let this go? What am I also letting go that I'm not really fully looking at? Because it's not just letting the experience go, it's letting the controller go. It's letting the controlling part of me not dictate things in my relationship. And all of these things are, of course, related to trauma, related to protectors. They're not who I really am, and they're not who you really are, but they're the parts of us that keep us safe. So I acknowledge the protector that's kept me safe. I acknowledge the part of me. I acknowledge those parts in him too. But I've had to really ask myself, not only am I willing to let the situation go and forgive him, but what am I also willing to let go? And I've had to be willing to let go of the controller, the withholder, the part of me that wants to have the upper hand and walk away like, oh, I'm better than. That was, and that is hard because it shows up mostly in my relationships with men. And that's been difficult for me to look at. So as I got clear on these things, I realized I wasn't really open to having a conversation with him and this moment. And so what I did was I voice messaged him as if I was going to send it to him. And I put it all out there. I said everything I've wanted to say. I said everything that I've already said, but needed to be heard again. And I really put it all out on the line. And by the end of it, I was emotional. I was in tears. And I was wondering, like, am I actually going to send this to him? And for other people, up until this point, I've sent them the message or I've had a conversation with them. This was one where I didn't know if it would be helpful or needed to actually send this to him. And so up until this point, I have not. But I can tell you from sharing that message and saying the words, I forgive you and I forgive myself, and all is forgiven in this moment across all timelines, both forward and back. I was liberated. I didn't realize how this was like an anchor into a deep ocean where I'm on a speedboat of life. This is really holding me back from letting love in, for letting light in, for letting in grace, which will be another episode that I'm going to record actually. Letting in grace, that we are all human and making mistakes, and all of our parts and protectors come up, and it can get really crunchy sometimes. So as I forgave him, I was really able to forgive myself. And I haven't sent that voice message yet, but it was really, really, really powerful. And it reminded me of all of the other areas of my life where I still haven't forgiven myself, particularly ways in which I've spent money. In the past, And even now, I mean, I still make a really good living. And I know the trajectory of my life is heading in an even more powerful direction. But there was this shame for times I had like just boatloads of cash at my availability, and then how I would just spend it unconsciously. And how I think about my parents and being at home with them for the last couple of weeks, and noticing ways in which they still struggle financially and have a hard time. And I shared this in my Threads account the other day, which is that I went home to remember why I started. I had to go home to remember why I started, because we can get so wrapped up in our vision, what we're doing for ourselves, how we want to spend money, our desires, that sometimes we can forget the real meaning and purpose to be generous, to serve, but to and also to receive for ourselves. But what does it all matter if it's only for us? I think that's the next evolution of leadership, is doing it for, first you lead for yourself, then you lead for others, then you lead for all of you, but then you lead for all of life. You lead for all of life. That's what transcendent leadership is. I lead for all of us. Your healing is my healing. As I've said this before, your forgiveness is my forgiveness. My money is your money. And I say that with caveat, of course, that it's with my generosity, but this inner working of like this reciprocity of all of life. And so I've also been working on and leaning into and releasing forgiveness in ways that I have done things that I held shame around, spent money, withheld love, been controlling. And this has been one of the deepest practices I've ever done. I've been in multiple courses, masterminds, programs. I've done practices. I've gone to retreats. I mean, I've done a variety of different work. And yet, the simplicity of forgiveness is just like a key that unlocks a door to your heart, that says that I am open and I am willing to feel all of it, that I'm open and I'm willing to share this love with you, even if the person doesn't, quote unquote, deserve it. Because it's the people that sometimes are the most seemingly undeserving of love who actually need it the most. And sometimes we do that to ourselves. We punish ourselves, and we withhold love and grace from ourselves, forgiveness from ourselves, because we believe that we are not deserving. On some level, maybe that was why I was holding on to shame, because I didn't believe that I deserved forgiveness. But the simplicity of this practice is what makes it so profound. To let love in, to let light in, to walk into the doorway of the heaven, the kingdom, the queendom that lives within us. Knowing it is that it's enough, that we're doing the absolute best that we can. It's a very inviting, confronting, and evoking practice. And so today, if you're listening to this or watching this, I invite you to unlock the key to your heart, to see where you still aren't letting love and light in, and to have conversations, to express all that wants to be expressed and all that wants to be seen in a safe way for you, to release this energy. Because as I've released this energy, I can tell you that opportunities continue to come to me. Conversations that I'm having with people, I'm noticing the miracles of all of life. I've gone from, wow, this is a miracle, this is a miracle, this is a miracle, to life is so miraculous. Everything is a miracle. I am literally walking in a living miracle. That's what forgiveness gives you. You get to see the miracle, the divinity, the love in every single thing. So I would love to know from you, if you do this practice, what this evokes in you. Clearly, it's evoking a lot in me, and what this provides for you. Not only do you what you let go of, but also what do you gain? What do you receive? What do you allow? What do you experience from all of this, let me know in the DMs, tag me in your stories, would love to know. And if this message landed with you, we would so greatly appreciate if you also gave us a review in iTunes or Spotify to get this message, to get this essence of love, unconditional love and grace, like Yeshua, like Jesus would walk with. How do we lead like Jesus? How do we walk in that way? And to share this message and to continue to do so. So much love to you today, and I will see you next week. Bye bye.